Welcome back to Priestess Initiations, the Goddess Coven. I'm Casey. This is episode 6, and today we're talking about Lilith, the first woman, the exiled one, the untamable. Lilith is the goddess who said no, the one who refused to submit, refused to lie beneath, refused to be anything other than what she was. And for that refusal, she was cast out, demonized, turned into a warning. This is what happens when women claim their power. But Lilith never diminished. She went to the wildness and became more. If you've ever been called too much, if you've ever been exiled for your truth, if you've ever chosen sovereignty over safety, you've met Lilith. So let's start at the beginning. The real beginning, before the story we've been told. Before Eve, there was Lilith, made from the same earth as Adam. Not from his rib, not derivative, not secondary, but equal. The first woman was not the obedient helper, but the autonomous being. Sorry, my dog. She was Adam's match, his equal in every way. And when Adam tried to dominate her, when he insisted she lie beneath him in all things, not just sexually, but in every aspect of their existence, Lilith spoke the word that changed everything. No. That single syllable shattered the cosmic order patriarchy tried to impose. No, I will not submit. No, I am not beneath you. No, you do not get to define my nature or control my body. No, I will not make myself smaller so you can feel larger. Think about how radical that was. In the very first story of creation, the first woman refused subordination. She looked at the man who demanded she bow and she said, "We are equals. You do not rule me." For speaking this truth, for refusing subordination, Lilith was cast out of Eden, exiled, demonized, painted as a monster who steals children and seduces men in the night. The original warning to women. This is what happens when you refuse to obey. This is what you become when you claim your own power. This is the punishment for saying no. But here's what they could not erase, no matter how hard they tried. Lilith was never diminished by her exile. She went to the Red Sea, the liminal place where salt water and wild energy meet, where boundaries dissolve and the untamed lives. She allied herself with demons. And remember, the ancient word for demons simply meant powerful spirits that refused domestication, beings that wouldn't bow to the new order. And in the wilderness, Lilith became more herself, undomesticated, unrepentant, unapologetic. She discovered that her sexuality was hers to give or withhold, not a resource for Adam to access whenever he wanted. She learned that her power didn't require anyone's permission. She found her voice, the one that spoke sacred no as fluently as yes. The myth says God sent 3 angels to bring her back, to threaten her with death and the death of 100 of her children daily if she did not return and submit. And this is dicey, but Lilith refused even this. She accepted the consequences of her sovereignty. And this is the uncomfortable truth about freedom. It has costs, sometimes ugly ones. And Lilith was willing to pay them rather than return to subordination. She chose the wilderness and all its dangers over paradise with a collar. So they replaced her. They made Eve. Compliant Eve, derivative Eve, Eve formed from Adam's body and therefore naturally subordinate. Eve, who was designed to be the helpmate, the one who wouldn't say no. but even Eve eventually ate the fruit. Some say, and I personally go with this teaching, that the serpent in the Garden of Eden was Lilith herself. Think about it. Who better to teach Eve about the fruit of knowledge than the woman who already chose knowledge over obedience? Who better to show her the way out than the one who already walked it? The serpent comes to Eve and says, "Eat the fruit. Wake up. You don't have to accept their version of paradise. You can know what they know. You can have power." And Eve, who was made to be obedient, made to never question, Eve eats the fruit. She chooses knowledge. She chooses to wake up. And patriarchy frames this as the fall, as original sin, as the moment everything went wrong. But what if it was the moment everything went right? What if it was Eve's first act of sovereignty, her first refusal to stay asleep? Lilith didn't come back as the serpent to punish Eve or corrupt her. She came back to teach her, to whisper, "You don't have to accept this. There's another way. The wilderness is terrifying, yes, but it's also freedom." And here's what this myth teaches us. We all have some Lilith and some Eve in us. We all have the part that says no immediately, that refuses from the beginning, that walks out the moment someone tries to control us. That's Lilith. And we all have the part that was taught to be good, to comply, to make ourselves smaller, to swallow our no until one day we can't anymore. That's Eve. Some of us are born Lilith. We never learned to submit. We were always too much, always wild, always saying no. And we've paid the price for it. Exile, rejection, being called difficult, being told we're too intense. And some of us were born Eve. We learned early to be obedient, to please, to accommodate. We said yes when we meant no for years, maybe decades, until something, some serpent, some Lilith whisper, made us wake up, made us eat the fruit, made us choose knowledge and power even if it meant losing paradise. Neither is better. Both are paths to sovereignty. The question is, which one are you? And if you're Eve, who is your Lilith? Who is teaching you to wake up? Because that's what Lilith does. She doesn't corrupt, she liberates. She whispers to the domesticated parts of us, you don't have to stay tame. You can remember your wildness. You can say no. So what does Lilith actually teach? Lilith represents everything that must be exiled for patriarchy to function. Women's autonomous sexuality, our refusal to subordinate ourselves, our primal wildness, our rage at injustice, our unwillingness to make ourselves smaller. Working with Lilith means confronting what we've been taught to exile in ourselves. Your sexuality that's yours, not performed for the male gaze, not transactional, not something that you give to someone, but yours. Your pleasure, your desire, your body, your boundaries. Lilith teaches you to reclaim it. Your no, the sacred no. The no without apology, without explanation, without softening it or making it palpable. Lilith teaches you that no is a complete sentence. Your rage, not the rage that's acceptable, measured, expressed appropriately, but primal rage. The rage that says, this is not okay. I will not tolerate this. I deserve better. Lilith teaches you that rage is medicine, not pathology. Your wildness, the undomesticated parts of you, the parts that don't fit, don't comply, don't perform femininity the way you're supposed to. The too loud, too intense, too much parts. Lilith teaches you that your wildness is your power. And here's what's hard. When you start reclaiming these exiled parts, people will call you a demon, essentially. They'll say you've changed, and not in a good way. They'll say you're too much, too angry, too sexual, too wild. They'll try to bring you back, to tame you, to get you to submit again. And you have to decide, am I willing to pay the cost of my sovereignty? Because that's Lilith's teaching. Freedom has costs. Saying no has consequences. Refusing to be domesticated means some people won't like you anymore, won't understand you, won't want you around. But the cost of subordination is higher. The cost of staying small is your soul. Lilith didn't return to the garden. She built her own kingdom in the wild places. She chose herself even when it was hard, even when it hurt, even when she lost things she loved. And she teaches you, you don't need their approval. You don't need their paradise. You need your truth, your power, your undomesticated self. But here's what's important to understand about Lilith's rage, especially when you first start working with her. When Lilith first calls to you, when you first start reclaiming your rage after years of suppression, that rage often wants to lash out indiscriminately at everyone, at all men, especially if you're a woman who's been harmed by men, at the whole fucking world. And I want to say this with compassion because I've been there. That's immature Lilith energy. That's traumatized rage that hasn't been integrated yet. When you first meet Lilith, especially if you're coming out of trauma, abuse, violation, your rage is raw. It's uncontained. It doesn't know how to discern between the man who harmed you and the man who didn't. It just knows masculine energy feels dangerous. And so it lashes out. This is a necessary phase. I'm not saying you should skip it or suppress it. You have to feel the full force of that rage. You have to let Lilith roar through you. But integrated Lilith, mature Lilith, mother Lilith, she doesn't lash out. She stands firm in her truth. She goes into the wild and releases her rage in a primordial scream. She lets it move through her body, lets it shake her, lets it burn. But she's not lashing out at individual men who don't deserve it. She's raging at the shadow of masculinity that tries to overpower. She's raging at the system, the patriarchy, the violence, the subordination. Integrated Lilith knows the difference between a man who's trying to dominate her and a man who's learning to hold space for her wildness. She knows how to direct her rage at what actually deserves it, instead of spraying it everywhere. And this matters because if you stay in immature Lilith energy, lashing out at everyone, you're punishing men who haven't harmed you for the sins of men who have. And that perpetuates cycles. You create more harm. You push away people who might actually be safe. And I say this because I did it. I lashed out. I was unfair to men who didn't deserve it. And I had to learn the difference between protective rage and traumatized rage. Lilith's rage is protective. It guards her sovereignty. It says you cannot enter my space with harmful intent. But it doesn't attack everyone just for existing, just for being a man. And there's another layer to Lilith that's absolutely critical, especially for survivors of domestic violence, emotional abuse, or any relationship where you're being dominated or controlled. Lilith is the goddess who helps you get out. She's the one who says, no, I deserve more. I would rather be alone than dominated. When you're in an abusive relationship, and this includes emotionally abusive relationships, not just physically violent ones, there's a part of you that knows something's wrong. But there's another part that's been trained to doubt yourself, to make excuses, to think maybe you're overreacting, maybe it's not that bad. Maybe if you just try harder, it'll get better. Lilith cuts through all of that. She says, this is not okay. You deserve better. Leave. She doesn't care if it's inconvenient. She doesn't care if you love him. She doesn't care if leaving is hard, if you don't know where you'll go, if people will judge you. She cares about your sovereignty, your safety, your soul. And for women who've been in these relationships, Lilith is often the force that finally gets them out, because she will not tolerate subordination. She will not let you make yourself smaller to keep someone comfortable. She will not let you stay in a place where you're being diminished, controlled, or harmed. And this is true for men in abusive relationships too. You can work with Lilith. Queer people can work with Lilith. Anyone can work with Lilith. But this is why Lilith was exiled. Because a woman who knows she deserves better, who would rather be alone than dominated, that woman cannot be controlled. That woman is dangerous to systems that rely on women staying in bad situations. Lilith teaches you your sovereignty is more important than any relationship. Your freedom is more valuable than anyone's approval. You can walk away. You can say no. You can choose yourself. And yes, it's terrifying. Leaving is terrifying. Even when, especially when, you know you have to. But Lilith walks with you into the wildness, into the unknown, into the exile. And she teaches you that exile is not punishment. It's freedom. There's one more big thing I need to say about Lilith, because this gets misunderstood, especially if you're in the immature Lilith phase where rage is raw and undiscriminated and does harm. And that is not okay. This is important to talk about because I haven't heard it talked about anywhere else. And it can feel like Lilith hates men. It can feel like she's anti-man, anti-partnership, forever alone in her wilderness and wildness, raging at all masculinity. And I get why. When you first meet her, especially if you're coming out of trauma or abuse, like I was, your Lilith might actually feel like she hates all men. And she might want to lash out at every man she encounters. She might not be able to tell the difference between the man who harmed you and the man who's trying his best to be safe. That's traumatized Lilith. That is trauma. That's your protection system saying, all masculine energy is dangerous, so I have to defend against all of it. And that phase is real. Sometimes it's necessary. You have to feel it. I felt it. For years, I couldn't trust any man. I lashed out. I was unfair. And I made men pay for sins they didn't commit. But that's not mature Lilith. That's not integrated Lilith. Integrated Lilith doesn't hate men. She demands more from them. And the myth makes it seem like Lilith left because she hated Adam, because she's anti-man, anti-partnership, forever rejecting relationship. But that's not it. Lilith left because Adam demanded her subordination. She left because he couldn't meet her as an equal. She left because he wanted to own her instead of love her. Lilith doesn't reject partnership. She rejects subordination. She doesn't hate masculinity. She refuses domination. And what Lilith teaches men, the men who are brave enough to meet her, to do the work, to earn her trust, is that they can be more. That they don't have to dominate to be powerful. That they can hold space for fierce feminine energy without trying to tame it or control it. This is what my current partner had to learn. He's had to learn how to be with my Lilith without trying to fix her, soften her, or make her more palpable. He's had to learn that when I rage, I'm not asking him to make it better. I'm asking him to witness it, to hold space for it, to not run from it or try to control it. He's had to learn that my wildness is not a problem to solve. My boundaries are not obstacles to overcome. My no is not a challenge to wear down. And when a man can do that, when a man can see your Lilith and not be threatened by her, when he can hold space for your fierceness without needing to tame it, that's when Lilith can soften. Not because she has to, not because she's being domesticated, but because she chooses to. Because she's finally met someone who sees her sovereignty as sacred, not as something to defeat. So no, Lilith doesn't hate men. But she will not settle for men, or anyone, who need her to be smaller so they can feel bigger. She will not tolerate domination, control, or subordination. And this is her gift to both the feminine and the masculine. She shows us what real partnership looks like. Not the subordination of one to the other, but two equals meeting, two sovereigns choosing each other, two wilds dancing together without losing themselves. But the masculine has to earn that. They have to show up. They have to do the work. They have to prove that they can hold fierce feminine energy without trying to tame it. And if they can't, Lilith walks away. She chooses exile over subordination. She chooses wilderness over captivity. She chooses herself. And she teaches you to do the same. So I need to tell you about my relationship with Lilith because it's been a long one. And it shows the evolution from immature rage to integrated sovereignty to learning to soften in right relationship. When Lilith first called to me, I had PTSD from sexual trauma. I was in my early 20s and I was drowning in rage. Rage at what had been done to me, rage at the men who'd harmed me, and rage at all men because I couldn't tell the difference anymore. And at that time, and this is an important distinction, I was doing my best to keep that rage in my shadow. Unclaimed rage is dangerous rage. And I was in immature Lilith energy. And I lashed out. I was unfair to men who didn't deserve it, who hadn't harmed me, who were just there. I punished them for the sins of other men. I couldn't discern. I just knew masculine energy feels dangerous, so I have to protect myself by attacking first. Or attacking back. And this is a common experience for women, and it's not talked about enough. And it's hard. It's hard for me to talk about this because I'm not proud of that. But I also understand it now. That was trauma. That was traumatized Lilith. That was my system trying to protect me the only way it knew how, by making sure no one could ever get close enough to hurt me again. And if they did, I'd push them away. But here's what happens when you stay in that energy. You can't heal. You can't integrate. You can't move forward because you're stuck in the wound, acting out the trauma, perpetuating harm, even if it's in the name of protecting yourself. So I did what a lot of women do when their rage becomes too uncontrollable, too much, too scary. I suppressed Lilith. I pushed her back down. I tried to be softer, more accommodating, more reasonable. And that's when I ended up in an emotionally abusive relationship. It wasn't as bad as some. I know women who've been through much worse and men who've been through much worse. And the comparison game is part of why I stayed so long. But it was bad enough. And the worst part, I didn't see it for years because I'd suppressed Lilith. I'd exiled the part of me that could say, this is not okay, I deserve better, and I need to leave. I made excuses, I rationalized, I told myself it wasn't that bad, that I was being too sensitive, that if I just tried harder, it would get better. But Lilith doesn't stay suppressed forever. She came back. And when she did, she was clear. She said, get out, say no, you deserve more. You would rather be alone than dominated. And so I left. And it was terrifying because leaving meant admitting I'd been wrong, that I'd stayed too long, that I'd let myself be diminished. It meant facing the unknown. It meant being alone, which felt like exile all over again. But Lilith was right. Exile was freedom. And once I was free, I did the trauma work that was backlogged a layer deeper in the spiral. And Lilith learned she no longer needs to attack first to protect herself, because she can choose to be free in exile anytime. And that was the important piece that I was missing before, is I was still trying to be in relationship to men without having healed. And sometimes the hard truth is you're not ready for that. And so I did the trauma work, and I did it deeply in the body. I found ways to feel confident in my ability to say no, to choose me. And once I did that, after I'd claimed a new level of sovereignty, I finally met my partner, my current partner. And there's an important step I'm skipping here. I learned male friendships again first. And that is a really important piece of this puzzle as well. But that's how my relationship with my current partner started, as friends. And this is where Lilith's evolution becomes important. Because when you've been through what I've been through, sexual trauma, lashing out, suppression, emotional abuse, leaving, you don't trust easily. You can't. My current partner had to earn my trust. And I don't say that lightly. He had to prove over and over that he could hold my Lilith without trying to tame her. That he could be with my wildness without needing to control it. That he wouldn't punish me for having boundaries, for saying no, for being too much. And he did. He showed up with a willingness to learn, to do the hard work. He learned and is still learning to hold space for my rage, my fierceness, without running, without trying to fix me, without demanding I soften before I'm ready. And that's when Mother Lilith started to emerge. And I just want to be clear, because this is really important, that I could not have ever birthed Mother Lilith in myself had I not changed my relationship to her from this unintegrated lashing out to this holding the line boundary of no. And these feel really different in your body. There's a push, right? Like when you push, that's a like outward energy. And eventually there's something different. And this is what I've discovered, and this is how I say no now in this relationship, and always will from here on out, because honestly, it's even more powerful. I root my feet in the earth. I feel my spine in alignment, right? You feel your abdominal muscles. Pull them back to your spine. You stand tall and firm. And I put my hands in front of me. And I just hold them there. And if anyone pushed on me, I am strong. I am the tree. I am not going anywhere. That's my no. But I'm not pushing toward them anymore. And this is Lilith. Mother Lilith knows her power can't be tamed or threatened by men. And because she knows that, because she's sovereign, because she's integrated in her rage, not only does she no longer need to lash out, but she can learn to trust. She can stand firm in her truth. She can hold her boundaries, and she can also soften. Not because she has to, not because she's being tamed, but because she chooses to. Because she's in relationship with someone who's earned her trust. This is the work I'm doing now. Integrated Mother Lilith, learning to soften into right relationship. Learning that I can be wild and in partnership. That I can have fierce boundaries and let someone in. That I can say no and I can also say yes. And we'll go deeper into this in season 2. There's a whole episode on teaching Lilith to soften that I have planned. But I want you to know, if you're in the lashing out phase, that's okay. That's part of the process. You have to feel the full force of your rage, and maybe the hard truth is, it isn't the right time for you to be in relationship to men yet. Maybe you have more healing to do first, so you don't do harm. And if you're in a relationship where you're being dominated, controlled, or diminished, Lilith is calling you. Listen to her. Get out. You deserve more. And if you've already done that work, if you've already reclaimed your sovereignty, know that Lilith doesn't have to live in exile forever. She can come back into relationship, but only with people who've earned the right to be in her presence. Only with people who see her wildness as sacred, not as something to tame. That's the evolution, from traumatized rage to sovereign boundaries to chosen softness in right relationship. Lilith walks all of it with you. And Lilith is still teaching me. I don't think she ever stops. But what's different now is I'm not afraid of her anymore. I'm not afraid of my own wildness, my own rage, my own refusal. And I'm learning slowly, imperfectly, how to bring her into the world without exiling her. How to be Lilith in the classroom as a teacher, in relationship, in my work. She doesn't have to live only in the wilderness anymore. She can come home, and she can still be wild. So let's close with a Lilith practice. Reclaiming your sacred no. So just think of a situation where you've been saying yes, but you mean no. Maybe it's small, a commitment you don't actually want to keep. Maybe it's big, a relationship, a job, a way of being that doesn't fit anymore. Take a breath and feel into your body. Where does that false yes live? Is it in your throat, your chest, your belly, somewhere else? Everyone's body's different. But just take a moment to find where that false yes lives. And then now imagine Lilith standing behind you, her hand on your back. She's not pushing you. She's just reminding you you can say no. She's being your support, that tree I was talking about. You're allowed to say no. No is a complete sentence. And if you're ready, practice saying it out loud right now, even if it's just to yourself. No. Say it again, a little louder. No. Feel how it lands in your body. Notice if there's fear, if there's guilt, if there's relief. Lilith is teaching your no is sacred, and the people who truly love you will respect it without you needing to lash out. Everything we explore here lives in practice. There's a link in our bio for our free community where you'll find our ritual grimoire, embodiment library, and online workshops diving deeper into the work. If this work is serving you and you want to support the podcast, I have a Patreon where you can get monthly new moon rituals, the ability to list your business in our Coven shop, and more, including bonus podcast content and some poems I'm currently working on the Maiden to Mother journey. That link is in our bio. And your support helps me keep creating this content and building the Coven. So if you're loving this podcast, please leave a review. It helps us reach more people who are ready for this medicine. And share it with your friends. Share it with someone who needs this episode. Subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Trust the spiral. This podcast is spiritual teaching, not therapy or medical advice.